Sravasti Abbey would like to join with Americans all over the country and maybe people all over the world to wish everyone a happy Juneteenth. It's a celebration day, and it's also, maybe more important than celebration, it's also a commemoration day. Juneteenth is celebrated every year on June 19th. It marks the day that enslaved African Americans in Texas learned of their emancipation in 1865. This year, it also marks the 23rd straight day of nationwide protests against the injustices Black people still face in 2020. That's some 235 years later. So I'm going to quote extensively from some Black scholars and Black spokespeople who know this history far better than I. Like most of the people here and probably many people in this country, this was not a history I learned in school. Dr. Soyaka Colbert is a professor of African American Studies at Georgetown University, and she gave a beautiful interview about this day today. She says it's really important, and this is important for us to get, it's important to think about Black people's history as fundamentally about expanding freedom in America more broadly. That the freedoms that the founders put into that document, put into that Constitution, were very lofty visions that were from the get-go tainted by the ignorance of sentient beings. And that a huge part of the struggle of African Americans for being able to claim their right has been to expand freedoms for all Americans throughout the last bit of time. She says very strongly, she says, so that Juneteenth, as we come to become more aware of it, is not just a Black holiday, but an American holiday. And that's something that we want to recognize and support. So what is it? It is the longest running African American holiday in the US. It's short for June 19th. And that's the day that slavery ended in America, as I said. So why Texas? What does Texas have to do with this? The Emancipation Proclamation that abolished slavery, that Abraham Lincoln signed in 1863, was proclaimed only to places under Confederate control. But people in the Confederate States weren't the only ones who enslaved people of African American descent. There were border states, there were rebel territories. Texas at that time was not a state. And a lot of Southerners took their slaves and their families and headed off to Texas to reestablish their way of life there. So Texas became a hot spot for enslavers who fled their states with the people they were enslaving. So at the end of the war in 1865, that of course made this proclamation go into effect. But it wasn't until June 19, 1865, federal troops led by General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and took control of the state, making the official end of slavery as the state's 250,000 enslaved people were free. So this year is the 155th anniversary of that holiday. So did Juneteenth end slavery? Although General Granger announced that all enslaved people were to be freed, slave masters and plantation owners were left to announce the news in their own timing. So some waited till after the harvest season to tell people. Some waited until the government official came to enforce them to proclaim it. So can you imagine? I mean, ever since the end of the war, people have been waiting. We're going to be freed. We're going to be freed. We're going to be freed. And the word didn't come, and the word didn't come, and the word didn't come. And then when they found out that they had been freed for 2.5 years and didn't know it, imagine how that felt. So, yeah. And even after the ratification of the 13th Amendment, that was ratified December 18th, 1865, which was an amendment that made slavery not allowable in this country. African Americans were often forced into other forms of servitude and a certain kind of slavery. other kinds of slavery that were not so blatant. As Dr. Colbert points out, she says, if you look at the movement to end slavery in 1865, to the passing of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, that's 100 years before Black people had the full rights of voting. And that puts a lot of tension around our narrative, our American narrative of the land of the free. So the interviewer asked her, why don't people know about this? And she said, partly it's that. America has a lot of investment in being the leader of freedom in the world. And so to face its own homegrown denial of that freedom to people here, born in this land, tilled this land, built these buildings, built this country for hundreds of years, that totally flies in the face of our self-identity of being the leader of the free world. And so that denial, that flat out denial, so oppressing a people that are a part of this country for so long, hopefully, is continuing to crack. President Barack Obama put out a statement today. He said, Juneteenth has never been a celebration of victory, nor an acceptance of the way things are. It's a celebration of progress. It's an affirmation that despite the most painful parts of our history, change is possible, and there is still so much work to do. So there are parallels, of course, with our own Buddhist practice. The function of freedom is to free someone else, Toni Morrison said. The function of freedom is to free someone else. And so, in the same way that as Buddhists, we are looking to free ourselves and to free, so that we have the capacity to help free all beings from just the suffering of cyclic existence itself, from the ignorance that at a grossest, coarsest, crassest form helps us not see the contradiction between the land of the free and the still oppression of formerly enslaved people, right? That ignorance is part of what we're trying to eliminate as Buddhists. And then, in a step-by-step way, to engage in that process on the conventional level seems like, to me, a very important part of our spiritual practice. To look at ourselves and to look at others and all the places where people are not acknowledged to be who they are, not seeing the potential of every living being to fully awaken. If we look at that, how can you say anybody is not worthy of any given thing? So I was very inspired to read today about Opal Lee. She's a 93-year-old activist. She is a lifelong Texan. And she has been working for 4 decades to make June 19th a national holiday. She was 12 years old when she experienced a horrific hate crime in her own town. I think it was Fort Worth. Her family had moved into a lovely house into a white neighborhood. Her mother had fixed it up beautifully. They had the lawn, everything was done well. And a mob of, I think, 300 white people took them out, pulled them out of their house, burned the house to the ground. This was in the 1930s. Definitely a part of that history in the United States and in Texas. But not just Texas. I'm not just going to blame it on the South, because it's not just South. It's everywhere. She took that, from that moment on, actually, she became an activist. It says, experiencing that hate crime, this led her into a life of teaching, activism, and eventually campaigning. So she began this effort to make Juneteenth a national holiday. In 2016, at the age of 89, she decided to walk from her home in Fort Worth, Texas, to Washington, D.C. 89 years old. She traveled 2.5 miles each day to symbolize the 2.5 years that Black Texans waited between the Abraham Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation and the abolishing of slavery when the general showed up in Texas. So last year, when people ask, okay, so last year, I think, no, I didn't write the number. A lot of states have adopted Juneteenth as a state holiday. But there is a movement now to make it a federal holiday. And her vision is to make it a celebration between June 19th and July 4th. Because she said on July 4th, the day of American freedom, Black people were not free. But if you take June 19th to July 4th and make that whole period of time a recognition of what it means to be free, to have equal access to all things under the law, then that will awaken the consciousness of the people of this country and will actually demonstrate, this is my annotation, demonstrate to the people of the world that maybe the American leadership in freedom still has a gasp of continuing on. Someone asked her, what is important that people understand about Juneteenth? She says, the fact is, none of us are free till we are all free. You know that. None of us is free till we are all free. She said, we have simply got to make people aware that no one is free till we're all free, and we aren't free yet. There are so many disparities. We need decent education, decent jobs that pay money, we need health care and all kinds of things, and if people would just get together and address these disparities, we'd be well on our way to being the greatest country in the world. So I wanted to look at today's activists. I wanted to know, where are you today? Those people who are the leaders of this movement. Because in my own kind of cynical view, it's like, okay, let's have a big holiday. Big deal. But, you know, it is a big deal. It is a big deal if we remember what the day commemorates, what it celebrates, and we get engaged behind how to move its aims forward. So I wanted to see, like, the NAACP National Director, Tiffany Lofton, and the Black Lives Matter co-founder, Opal Tometi, believe this year's celebration will be even more significant than previous years. Hearing that from them, I felt much more willing to give this BBC, actually. Lofton says this, the significance of Juneteenth has always been meaningful in the Black community. However, in the face of the continuous onslaught of racial incidents, police brutality and killings and hate crimes, we're what? Well, basically what she says, we're still not there. But both of them said in their quotes that I obviously didn't print out completely, what they said was that this awareness now, this widespread view, this lens on Juneteenth, this importance of this day, and these many, 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 many days of demonstration give an opportunity for there to be radical change. It will be slow, because that's how things are. But the heightened awareness seems to be a very, very important time in this country. Dr. Colbert says it's important. Memorials and holidays are places we take time to remember, and they help us reflect on our past and set goals for the future. To spend time on this holiday, we have a chance to engage with where we've come from and where we want to go, and to celebrate successes along the way. So to fulfill Opal's vision, to make Juneteenth not just a Black holiday, but American holiday, then we can get engaged. We can educate ourselves about this history that was not taught. There are many, many, many good histories now being written by scholars that are looking into all the crannies and bringing forward the stories that were not told in the books that, even in your generation, you didn't get this, right? No. We can donate to causes that help fight racial injustice. We can donate to causes which help to work in police brutality. We can engage in government activities so that people are more so that the government is more responsive to racial disparities. We can donate to causes which help to provide social and academic support to help Black youth succeed in college and beyond. There are many ways that we can be involved, even in the midst of a pandemic. Today, there are many marches, vehicles riding through streets. There are some online town halls. There are, this weekend, there are rallies that are going digital. So, yeah, it's important that we take this time, pay attention to what's going on, pay attention to what's been going on all along. Acknowledge what's been going on all along. Acknowledge our own part, even in our ignorance. To take, to kind of claim that and own that. And to proceed, I think, in a very steady, clear-minded way to create a situation for the liberation and equality of all beings in this country, to really overcome all the human rights abuses that we find in the world to the best of our ability. Most importantly for us, to always see the ignorance that's driving this. Recognize that we are not free from it. We are not free of our own karmic causes. And know that we have the capacity to do so. And so do all of our social engagement within the framework of this is a part of my bodhisattva path. This is a part of my wish to become a bodhisattva myself. This is a part of my wish to develop my own qualities, my own equanimity, my own practicing the 6 perfections, to work with my own generosity, to cultivate my own ethical conduct, to cultivate fortitude in every kind of situation, to cultivate my joyous effort, to develop my meditative concentration, and to bring it all to a point of wisdom. It must be supported by our wisdom, or we're just flailing in the wind. To use all of our practices to help us move forward, to liberate ourselves, to become fully awakened, and therefore to be able to liberate all living beings from all of this. So that, yeah, Juneteenth will be a great picnic, and all that history will have been purified. However long it takes.